welcome back to our first in-season recording of the 2025 season after our over 2 hour long season preview and then a live show over at Great Exchange last week before the Blue Hens kicked off their season against the Delaware State Hornets. I'm back here with my co-hosts, Dan Steenkamer and Brody. Dan, how are you doing?
Bryce, I'm very well, and I'm excited to get into week two. I think I've mentally flipped that switch already, but it's wild how quickly the week one Labor Day weekend goes. Especially for us, it felt like the end of camp went right into week one because of all the fun we had at Green and the planning for Green. So thanks again to Green and the Touchdown Club and Delaware Athletics and Z, Casey McDonald, everybody who made it happen. So I just want to give that shout out. And yeah, we're doing great on the way to getting ready to take air. At least Brody and I are.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, the Blue Hens kicked their season off, and we got to watch on Thursday night and enjoy football from Friday through Monday, stress free to kick back and relax. And that event that you just discussed, and thanks for giving thanks to all those people that involved us and helped us, really put out the best product possible. The MVP of the night was Brody behind the scenes working as our producer, sending everything live to YouTube, making sure we sounded good. So Brody, feels good to be back here with you after that event and after watching you stand in the rain for 2 quarters at the end of that. So how are you doing from week one to week two?
It felt like being out there. It's real. It's real ball again. It's not like real ball until you're out in the rain, out in the cold. It wasn't that cold, but it was raining. But we were out there for the whole game, out there with Bryce and his dad. And it was great. Great to see the Hens back in action and great to be in the stadium again.
Well, it was so great to see Tubby Raymond Field with the Conference USA logos on it, and it felt good to see it at almost max capacity there through the first half. Before that weather that wasn't on the forecast came through, so it felt fantastic to be there live with fans again and just show that excitement heading into the year. And I guess let's just dive right into week one because we have a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to start out we're going to have a normal segment style for each week between the seasons, and this is our first time really showcase that. This first one's going to be game overview, initial reactions. We're going to jump into each side of the ball, talk a little bit about it before we jump into the next week. So the Blue Hens, while a slow start, rallied around and finished with a 35-17 win over the Route 1 rivalry Delaware State Hornets against Deshaun Jackson's first head coaching game in his career. And Dan, I'm going to kick it over to you to start with this one, especially the offense had a slow start, as I was talking about, and the slow start could have been through a lot of ingredients, maybe the second drive of the game, first play, Zach Marker, second play in that series, I believe, actually, Zach Marker pushes for that first down, gets that first down in a scramble, and then shows that he can't get up on his own power. Later that drive, Nick Minicucci comes in, drives them downfield, a couple first downs, a fumble happens inside the 5. And then another factor could be just, you don't know what kind of defensive structure you're playing against in Delaware State. Some new pieces on the field. Talk about the beginning of this game. What kind of factors do you think really played in outside the ones I mentioned, connecting them all, and did it really concern you at all in the beginning?
Yes, Bryce, I have to say I was concerned from a Delaware perspective as a Delaware onlooker and somebody who wants to see Delaware succeed. It was a reminder overall, kind of my overall impression of Thursday night. It was a reminder that season opening games are a little bit of a different breed. They're a little bit of a different cat. I think I got a little bit caught up on our end, we have this big pregame show and we're going to be at Grain and we're talking about the overall season. We're talking about CUSA, FBS football. I do think it really hit me on Delaware's very first possession offensively that, whoa, I was reminded, all of a sudden Delaware has all the pressure on it. I was reminded, wait a second, UD's the team that has all of this pressure, has everything to lose and not as much to gain, whereas Del State can really fly around, play pretty loose and confidently. It's not as if Delaware State had anything to lose by giving up a gain or falling behind early on. Del State, I'm not saying they were playing with reckless abandon, but you saw that DSU had that edge, played with a lot of tenacity. Got to give Deshaun Jackson a lot of credit because Del State arrived with really just, they were hitting hard on defense. They were really quick. They looked more athletic. The Hornets were definitely getting to the edges with success. So I do think that a lot of it has to do with Delaware State, and that's a testament to the visiting team, and kind of seeing Delaware ease into the flow of a game. Hard to find a flow of a game, though, when there are early drops, just early nerves or jitters showing on the very first game at this level. The opponent's not at the FBS level, obviously, but just feeling that, again, that pressure of the moment, I think, was a little bit of a factor. At least you could kind of feel it hitting you right from the very first snap on offense. So I would say that that's something that is on my mind coming out of the game is once you saw Delaware overcome the shock factor of losing Zach Marker as well to that sudden injury, game-ending injury, of course, we don't know, season-ending injury possibly for Zach Marker, which is just devastating news on multiple fronts. First of all, on a personal level for Zach, but I could go on and on about that. I think those are the biggest overall impressions, though, is, hey, this was a harsh reminder early on. This is what week one can be like, but don't chalk it all up to just week one issues. There are some things that need to be corrected in terms of how Delaware answers out of the gates, certainly against a team like Colorado. But number one credit goes to Delaware State, and additionally, a couple more variables, being the first night, being an unknown opponent, and also having such a tough blow emotionally of losing the starting quarterback.
You made a good point with, this is the first drive, the first time that you're playing against someone, not your own teammates every day in practice. So your defense, maybe knows what sets you're running a little bit. Maybe you're getting a little too comfortable with each other, but that was the first time really throwing on the pads against another side. There's no preseason like we've seen 3 weeks in the NFL. So maybe it takes a little bit to get going. And obviously, yes, definitely thinking about Zach Marker and his family through the early injury assessment, recovery timetable, timelines that he's going through now. And, you think about everything that Zach's been through from 2023 being going through that season-ending injury after getting his opportunity to get on the field and looking really good. Like we talked about that game in Towson where he had 16 straight pass completions. And you think about 2024, really saving himself for this 25 season, going through a full camp with himself running the ones and just thinking about how early and how devastating that is for the team and for mostly himself. And I just know there's a whole mental battle when it comes to with physical injuries, and definitely thinking about him through these early phases until we find out more. But the offense eventually did get going. Once Nick Minicucci got in the offense, and once they had a few drives to get comfortable, they were rolling. 4 touchdowns in their final 5 drives of the game, not counting the last possession where they ran out the clock, including an 8-yard run on a quarterback draw being the first touchdown of the season from Minicucci, finishing the day 28 for 36 with 270 yards and 4 total touchdowns, including that running score. On the receiving end, Jake Thal and Kyrie Duplessis, each with 7 receptions and a touchdown. Thal with 92 yards, with Duplessis 89, a single-game career high for himself. Brody, let's talk about when the offense really started to click. What moment in that second quarter did you really see the offense really turn a corner? And overall, do you think it was a net positive for this group after 60 minutes?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because when you look at the Zach Marker injury, it kind of took the air out of everyone in Delaware Stadium, because you work all off season with like him taking first team snaps, and that's like kind of who the game plan is kind of based around, and then immediately like he's out, and thoughts with him, of course, you hate to see that happen. Then Minicucci comes in, and he kind of has to realize that he's playing ball right now. Like he's out there on the field in week 1, which has to be kind of disorienting for him. The whole area is taken out of the whole stadium because no one knows what's happening to Zach Marker. It kind of takes until the surprise hits you that DSU has the lead. Possibly for the very first time in the Route 1 rivalry, Delaware State has the lead on Delaware. And that's when I think the sidelines sobered up. They're like, we have to go out there and win this game. We can't just like sit here and kind of like think about what just happened. You have to put the pads on, have to go out there, have to win the game. And that's what they did. I think it was a net positive. Kind of hop into my coach speak. You have to learn to face that adversity, and they had it in week 1. It's not every team that has that level of adversity in week 1. And you could take that any way you want to. If I'm a coach, I'm going to say that's a good thing for kind of team building. As for me, I don't know if it was a positive or a negative, but I guess we're going to find out as the season goes on, right? I think that Minakuchi, as he has before, he adopted his role as quarterback pretty well. He was the highest rated quarterback of all Conference USA quarterbacks in week 1, which is great.
Yeah, I like Thaw, Duplessis were definitely, Thaw coming back finally, being that standout, and especially definitely finishing on a high note with that 50-yard touchdown grab to really seal the game. Duplessis, we've talked about him. We talked about him in the pregame show. We've heard around camp that he was going to get targets early, and he showed that. And that one-handed catch was phenomenal. As a Notre Dame Irish fan myself, after the Hens, watching that Notre Dame Miami game with that one-handed catch in the end zone, of course, that got a little bit more attention than Duplessis, but Duplessis was very beautiful as well. And I think that was actually my turning point for the offense to really click. And that the first big play of the day, we've always talked about Brian Carty's offense, explosive plays. We didn't really see many. They were really pushing third downs, a couple fourth downs, and they were really just kind of working their way up the field. But that was the first kind of explosive play to open up the offense and eventually getting the first score of the season. You talked about Minakuchi, highest graded via PFF from all CSOA quarterbacks. He was the highest rated Blue Hen from the night. Shout out to Fenton Bros as well. He started basically all over the offensive line. But I think this might have been one of his first, if not the first, at center, and he was rated the Conference USA Offensive Lineman of the Week. So definitely props to Bros as well. The last point I'll make, their third down and fourth down efficiency, 8 for 13 on third down, 62%. Really strong. I think they talk about the NFL level. You're really pushing for 40 to 45%. That's a good offense. So they shot that with flying colors. The average length was 7 yards. So they didn't even set themselves up for easy third down conversions, and they converted 7 of their last 9, and they finished 2 for 2 on fourth downs as well. So the offense got a while to get going, but once they did, it looked like they were pretty comfortable in every down and distance. Let's throw it over to the defense now. Dan, there was a couple big interceptions, both on the back end, and really started from creating havoc in the backfield from that front three. Even that second one was more than 3. It was a 6-man blitz there. Who stood out to you on the defensive side of the ball on the first night?
Yeah, you just spoke to it, Bryce. The group that I was targeting was looking back at the video of KT Say's interception and the Khalil Ali touchdown return on an interception. Starts havoc in the backfield, defensive line, defensive edges. I was looking closely. Everybody can see my glasses if you're watching on YouTube. So my vision, I'm trying to see on the ESPN Plus playback at Delaware Stadium. And by the way, I'm friends with Hens All Access, the crew, but the feedback in CUSA chats, circles wasn't great. Like hopefully, first night that continues to get built up. We'll see the production and the whole 9 yards. That crew works hard. They're going to get it right. But hopefully I was still able to see the numbers, but it's just a matter of getting it all clicking on the production wise for the home games this season. But, and I'm talking about produced streaming home games, but anyhow, not to get off track, I was able to get the playback on ESPN Plus. So, I can't bite the hand that feeds me, right? Want to recognize, I believe it was Yelbert on the rush, as well as Matthews, and I think Price. So James Yelbert, Noah Matthews, Quire Price. That's what I believe. Again, I was trying to see with the end zone angle on the replay we had with Hens All Access and ESPN Plus. So I just wanted to make sure I got as close to accurately on their jersey numbers as possible. And so those are players I want to recognize. But I think it's easy to see, a jump ball a little bit at the other end with Say. Of course, Say, he has a way of just kind of, whether he's at the middle of the field, either sideline, he covers so much ground, and we know that. And so you can't overlook the fact that's a game-changing takeaway. And Ali on the return for an interception, just sensational. But I think, a little bit of pressure on the backfield, a little bit of forcing underdog and taking some risks and making a poor decision or two. So that's I'd especially like to recognize along the defensive side of the ball there, because it's going to be, we'll talk about it a little later, but against Colorado, you're going to have to force Colorado to get a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit out of their regular offense, a little bit making some hasty decisions, because Colorado is going to be that kind of built to have 2 quarterbacks they can turn to make probably quality decisions to a bunch of talented playmakers on the outside. So especially going from Del State into Colorado, I want to recognize defensive players who helped push DSU into some bad decisions.
There were some big plays that the defense made, but Brody, the Hornets did actually have a lot of success on the night offensively. They finished the night with 200 rushing yards, including 4 carries that went for 20 yards or more. I think they had one that went for 45 and one for 31. They really had a success in outside zones, running the outside of the trenches there. As a team, tackling and run defense, you talked about Minicucci's score. Those tackling and run defense were the 2 lowest scores by a significant amount on PFF for the Hens. Why do you think the Hens struggled on the ground in this first game, and does it give you a little bit of concern moving forward?
It gives me a bit of concern for sure. I noticed a lot of the D-line. They needed to kind of maintain their gaps a bit better. And the linebackers were playing very far off the line of scrimmage, even dropping back in coverage most of the time. What that did was it let the middle of the field wide open. We have a lot of those like bandit linebackers, hybrid backs, who like love to drop back in coverage, which is their job in the scheme. But it does leave the middle of the field open, if the O-line provides like a lane for the quarterback to rush, or if we only have a few D linemen rushing, it provides an opening for the run game, whether that's delayed handoffs, quarterback draws, or whatever it may be, especially a few moments after the snap, when everyone's kind of in position. So I would like to see a bit more gap integrity from the defensive line moving forward, and I hope that with this 3-3-5 defense, the linebackers play a little bit more like in the middle of the field to provide that run stopping capability, because it did kind of scare me a little bit seeing DSU gash us for those chunk plays.
Yeah, I think we can all agree from this that both sides of the ball, definitely highs, definitely lows, and you want to take as many of those highs as possible, definitely minimize those lows moving forward. And week one, it's a little bit expected. So it's a big jump in an opponent from week 1 to week 2. Of course, they have a couple more days than a normal week's prep once they get later in the season. So we will get to those once we get into the Colorado conversation, learn more about them, give our takes on what they really need to focus on outside of just talking about this from an analysis standpoint, looking back. But I could give you guys a couple rapid fire questions before we get into our next segment. First, I'll throw it back to you, Brody. What was your favorite play of the night?
I mean, it had to be the Kyrie Duplessis catch, and that's going to be what everybody says. But I also want to zoom in on the Jake Thaw touchdown, because that wasn't a crazy catch. It wasn't really anything too extravagant on the athletic. It wasn't really anything too extravagant on the athlete side of things. It was just really great play design. Just like schemed Jake Hall to be wide open with nobody on him. That's exactly the type of play design we're going to need moving forward. Not necessarily relying on athletes to make plays all the time, which they definitely will, because we have some great athletes on the team. But just like scheming guys to be wide open in those situations, that makes it easy for Minicucci and our pass catchers to make a play. That's really what I like to see.
Yeah, I think my dad's a big Raiders fan, and when they had Hunter Renfrow back in the day, he always would say third and Renfrow. They were looking for Renfrow at the sticks, and I think Jake Thaw is going to be playing that role very much this season for the Hens. Dan, you talked a little bit on the defensive side of the ball. You gave flowers to people at the front that, they don't get the INT for a play like that. But, think about both sides of the ball, maybe a name that none of us three have mentioned. Who was an under-the-radar who had an under-the-radar performance that we haven't mentioned yet that deserves their flowers as well?
Yeah, under the radar, because there are a number of names that just are like the no-brainers. Because before we move on all the way, Duplessis' one-handed catch has to be mentioned, as if anybody was at the game, you feel the momentum finally, like it's like plugging a charger into a phone or something, or like it felt like lighting up the electricity with a socket. Like, it was like, oh, snapping back into life. You felt the place come alive again. So, but that's obviously the opposite of under the radar. For actually being under the radar, I think about the offensive line going to the other front, and Sproles was honored Conference Player of the Week or I should say Lineman of the Week at that position. I'm gonna have to recognize Patrick Shupp, because Shupp, I feel like we mentioned in camp, just talking among ourselves here, doesn't get the same number of times his name's brought up, but talk about a guy who you could finally say, we're going to plug him right back into that one of the guard spots. And even as the right side of the O-line looks a little bit newer with Kachisi and Noah Roshak, night number 1 there against Del State, showing up at right guard and right tackle. You look at that left side, and it starts at center with Brose on this occasion, but then, of course, left tackle O'Neal. But left guard, Shupp, it's just very reassuring to have Shupp in his experience and the number of starts he has in his career under his belt. You didn't hear Shupp's name called for a penalty that I can remember as well against Delaware State. Don't think I'm misremembering there, but yeah, that's who I'd like to, even though I was tripping over my words there, which I apologize for, I was trying to get out the word, Shupp, because I do think that's probably one of my top under the radar names.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned Shupp, because he was on mine as well. He was the highest graded offensive lineman of the night on PFF for the Blue Hens at the left guard spot with a 89.5 pass block score, which is very much in the green when you look at the PFF scale. Kachasi, first start, looked great as well, had an 80.2 pass block score on the right side of the interior. I'll also throw, we talked about the touchdown plays. The Jakari Kelly touchdown was one of my favorite, because I love play designs. I have to figure out how to get more film on my account, but the play design was a bunch set on the left side with Brandon Raymond, Elijah Sessoms, and Jakari Kelly on the left side. Sessoms had an out route. Raymond did a quick drag across the field, and then Kelly did an angle route cut from out to in. The ball was just in a super tight window, caught, and then Kelly fought for those extra yards through. So that play design was beautiful. I love breaking down a lot of Coach Carty's play designs, especially in the red zone. He comes up with some good ones from years past, and so yeah, great shout out on those names, and just wanted to highlight that play before we jump into our next segment, which is the pecking order.
Awesome. Well, this is my weekly segment here, the pecking order. It's just a little conference power rankings. Now, these aren't necessarily rankings of where they are when it comes to the SP Plus, or like really any like analytical numerical system here. It's just kind of the pecking order. It's what I think how each team has performed so far in this season. And by definition, it's really tough to make a conference ranking this early with so little data out there. But we do have some good data on some of these teams. So let's just jump right into it. I'm just going to put it up on the screen. So here at number 12, we have Middle Tennessee. I don't think anyone can debate this one. They're the only team to have lost to their FCS opponent thus far, getting smashed by Austin Peay. Next up at 11, we have Sam Houston, who's the only 0-2 team right now. They're also the only team to have a conference loss. So by default, that puts them at the bottom here. Number 10, we have Missouri State, who kind of got a tough draw off the bat here, losing to University of Southern California by just 1 million points. And you hate to see that. They play Marshall this week, so hopefully that's an easier draw for them after what happened to Marshall last year. Number 9, we have New Mexico State. And the next couple are going to be kind of close together. We don't have so much data. So from number 9 to maybe number 5, they're all kind of close. So just keep that in mind if you want to yell at me, which you can do. It's a free country, I guess. Number 9, we have New Mexico State, who struggled with Bryant, who is a pretty good team out of this EAA. I'll be interested to see how they kind of operate in year 2 of being in the Coastal. But they hung around with Bryant. I think it was 6-3 at halftime, and then they pulled away in the fourth quarter. Number 8 is Liberty. I know this is very low for Liberty, but kind of this same deal. They were tied with University of Maine, having all up until the fourth quarter, and that's also very tough. You can't be ranked in the top 3 if you're tied with Maine at 7 points apiece up until the fourth quarter. To their credit, they did pull away. They ended up scoring 21 unanswered there in the fourth. But up until that point, it was a real slugfest. UTEP here, who did lose their game against Utah State, but I watched that game, and they didn't look horrible. They looked pretty respectable against Utah State, and so I'm going to give them a little bit of credit here. At number 6, we have Delaware. I have them a little bit high just because I've read up so much on all the statistics and stuff. I'm willing to give them a little bit of credit for coming back after Zach Marker went down. But like I said, numbers 9 to about 5 are all pretty close together. You could make any argument you wanted. At the top end of this group is Kennesaw, who played really well against Wake. And we'll see how impressive that truly was as the season goes on. But if not for a few missed kicks, they would have beaten Wake Forest. I believe the program's very first P5 win, unless I'm forgetting somebody. I'm not super up to date on Kennesaw's overall history. Top 4 here we have Jacksonville State, who didn't look too bad against UCF. So that's respectable. Have to give them their credit there. And then the last 3, I think all kind of appear as very like well-rounded teams. We have Louisiana Tech at 3, who demolished their FCS opponent. They looked very complete. Has a roster. Number 2, we have FIU, which might be kind of high for FIU, but they also demolished their FCS opponent. Kind of like Louisiana Tech, they looked very complete when compared to teams like New Mexico State or Liberty. Definitely Middle Tennessee, maybe even Delaware, considering how you want to look at that. And then Western has to be number 1, the only 2-0 team, the only team with a conference win. And as I mentioned twice already, we don't have a lot of data out on these teams yet. It's still very loose, these rankings going into week 2. But as the season kind of goes on, we'll see more and more, and we'll be able to put this pecking order in a little bit more of some order.
This pecking order is super fun. And like you said, it's going to get a lot easier over time, especially when we have common opponents starting to play each other. We start seeing the conference standings really leak itself out, and these look super different than the bowl confidence power index that CBS Sports thought was a power ranking into itself for the 2025 season. And I know you might be surprised at some, those listening might be surprised at some listings, like a Liberty at 8, Liberty at 7-7 through 3 quarters, halfway, getting into the fourth a little bit, tied with Maine, who we are very familiar with at Delaware in the CA days. You played them, handled them last year. So when we talked about the Blue Hens struggling, a little bit to start the 2025 season, so did the favorites heading into the 2025 season and the Liberty Flames themselves. And then we've seen, teams like UCF and Wake Forest and take a little bit to get going against some of our in-conference opponents as well in Jacksonville State and Kennesaw State. So like you said, there's only been one conference game so far, the Week 0 matchup against Sam Houston and Western Kentucky. And then there's one this next weekend. So if there are Liberty fans that catch this and they're upset that they're at 8 and Jacksonville State's at 4 in this pecking order, they play on this upcoming Saturday in Jacksonville State. So I would say that when I saw the list, I thought the Liberty one I disagreed with, but I can see why you did it, and it'll solve itself out, and especially after this upcoming week.
Yeah, building on that, I'm going to play devil's advocate is a funny, overused cliche to use with Liberty for obvious reasons. Devil's advocate. It's just, anyway, that was corny of me. But the point is that I think Liberty folks would have the argument that Delaware's win over Delaware State is not that different than mean, Maine is a much better opponent on paper in the FCS than Delaware State. You look at Maine, Liberty pulling away late to put away Maine. I think the argument would be that Delaware's win really wasn't all that dissimilar than what Liberty had in terms of finding a way to make it look more comfortable at the end or by the end. But if Del State had not beaten itself in some respects, you saw some procedural things that had come up, first-time college head coach things kind of came up along the way. So I'm not saying the flags are on Deshaun Jackson individually, but just seeing some of those things that are opening night mistakes coming from DSU, a penalty called back, a touchdown that I think would have been the first touchdown of the game on Thursday night, if I remember correctly. A Delaware State touchdown offensively, had an offensive penalty. So I just think if Delaware State had been a little bit more clean, the Delaware DSU game would have wound up looking more like the Maine Liberty game, such that I could see the argument where Liberty is saying, nah, this pecking order isn't it. But I think it's well done overall. I think it's well done. I think it's well done. It's entertaining. I love it. We're going to keep it up. And I'm interested to kind of compare maybe more of a side-by-side of Liberty and Delaware's Week 1 games.
Absolutely. Well, that'll happen in a couple of weeks. We'll have a very much more hashed out pecking order here, but I also want to transition into my next halftime segment here, the rival rundown. Where I go ahead and look at past opponents, past rivalries, and also future non-conference opponents, just kind of dip my toe in the water and see what we're working with here in the future. I want to start out with maybe the most old-head Delaware game ever, which is Temple versus UMass. Two teams that were not scheduled to play for a long time. I mean, Temple not until 2029 or 2030 at the earliest, and UMass isn't even on the schedule. But for Hens fans who care about these teams, you might want to know that Temple absolutely blew out UMass. Two of the teams who are lower on the SP+, I think they're both bottom 10 or 12 at the start of this season. But the Casey Keeler era had Temple as begun, and it kicked off in huge fashion. It started off 7-10 at the end of the first quarter. But then Temple scored 21 unanswered, and then two more touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And it wasn't even close by the end. It was a good game, though, until it got kind of away from UMass. I'm also looking at UConn, who's coming up in a couple weeks. They demolished their FCS opponent, Central Connecticut, 59-13 for the first time in a while. Man, I'm scared of these Huskies. If you asked me 2 years ago if I was scared of the Huskies going into this game now, I'd be like, nah, I'm really excited to play them again. But now, I don't know, I'm kind of nervous. But maybe they'll choke against the Hens like they tend to do. They haven't lost to a G5 team in at least a year, though. They didn't lose to one at all last year. So, I'm a little nervous. And then we also had, this is a future matchup, but Coastal Carolina played University of Virginia. Two teams that we have on the schedule for next year. And Coastal dropped that game to Virginia by a little bit. It was 48-7 there at the end. UVA looks great. They look really retooled, rebuilt, and Coastal doesn't look as good as they did a couple years ago. But those are two teams to keep in mind that we are playing next year. So it is good to keep an eye on them. Coastal will be dropping back in on periodically as a regional G5 that also has a chicken mascot. That's a great connection, and I'm glad that we're playing them. And then the last team to go into is Colorado, which we may have already done by this point in the podcast a little bit. But they dropped one to GT. GT handled them. Kind of pulled away there at the end. It wasn't like a blowout. It was a pretty close one throughout. But Colorado did make a lot of mistakes that led them to drop that game. And it makes me nervous because I don't think that they start 0-2, or at least they don't want to start 0-2. But we'll see what happens this weekend.
Yeah, so I think Connecticut, similar to watching the Colorado Georgia Tech game in Week 1, I will be following Connecticut's Week 2 matchup even closer to understand the Huskies. And starting with the Temple game, it's reminded me of following Connecticut closely when we were at the FCS ranks when we had plenty of our players, transfer there to finish out their careers, and Brett Buckman, Noah Plack. So, it was interesting to watch Temple and seeing Ty Davis and Jojo Bermudez's name mentioned on air, of course, with Casey Keeler, of course, is going to have the tie always to Delaware, and hearing his name. So, definitely, I think the Colorado game is I'm looking forward to most next weekend, but Temple I'm going to have an eye on, not because I'm trying to figure out them for 2029 or whatever it is, but just following the players that made an impact for the Hens in their time. So, Brody, thanks for running our first edition of the Pecking Order. We can't wait to continue this on a weekly basis. I think fans will definitely appreciate this. Not just thinking of the week ahead, the week past, but keeping up with the league, keeping up with the future rivals and the current rivals to come. So now we're going to jump over into the week 2 matchup against the Colorado Buffaloes, where Dan got to sit down with David Talks Buffs, current member of the College Huddle, Colorado's representative of the network that we're a part of, and super excited to now let Dan take it away from here.
Welcome back into Feathers and Field Goals here this week for Delaware football, getting set to take on the Colorado Buffaloes out in Big 12 country, we'll call it, out in Boulder. Delaware playing its first FBS opponent in its inaugural FBS season here. Delaware starting out 1-0 against Delaware State, and we now get a chance to learn more about Colorado with David Talks Buffs. It's David Neal of David Talks Buffs, the YouTube channel and multi-platform Colorado content creator, joining us now. David, hey, thank you so much for taking your time with, I guess, a fledgling FBS level program, as far as the podcast world even goes. Appreciate you being a part of it and helping us get a sense more of Colorado beyond just all the headlines that I guess we all see week in and week out with Coach Prime.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Daniel. This is something that I've been looking forward to. Congratulations on making it to the FBS level. That's a huge deal, and quite a start to your season. If I remember correctly, you guys faced Deshaun Jackson last week, and so this week you got Coach Prime. How about that?
It is a heck of a back-to-back that's really been talked about a lot all offseason, that's for sure, is the way those two line up back-to-back. And maybe that's not such a good thing for Delaware in the sense that we know Deshaun Jackson and Coach Prime, they seem to be having a good relationship there. So D-Jax, I'm sure, can kind of pass along the extra tidbits of insight to Coach Prime. Not that Coach Prime will be needing any extra help, perhaps, but that could be a factor, too. So it is funny that they go back like that. But getting into Colorado and learning a bit more about Colorado's squad this year from afar, of course, all the conversation about seeing the NFL draft picks now on their way in the league. Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter won't be bringing the same star power for Delaware's visiting fans who are looking to see the whole atmosphere and everything that Deion Sanders brings, but still obviously so much talent on the field and the way it's kind of, I don't want to say been rebuilt, but help us understand what has the conversation been like over the offseason leading into this year in Boulder for the locals, folks who have been following this program for a long time and not just more recently with all the studs out there last season?
Yeah, it's definitely a changing of the guard, kind of a new era. Of course, this is the first time Coach Prime has been coaching a team where he doesn't have his sons on it. So it's a little bit different of a feel. But there's a lot to be excited about with this team. Yeah, we don't exactly have the star power that we've had the last couple of years. I think, though, we are a deeper team, especially when it comes to the trenches on the offensive and defensive line. But this definitely is a team right now that is looking to establish an identity on both offense and defense. A lot of new pieces, especially on offense with Caden Salter transferring in here from Liberty, and a rebuilt offensive line, an improved offensive line, definitely. But we still have a long ways to go, I think, in kind of figuring out who are going to be the leaders of this new era post Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. How exactly are we going to play on offense? What's our brand of football? That was kind of a lot of our conversation post-game after Georgia Tech. We might have fallen into the Pat Shurmur special. It doesn't matter who we got behind center. Pat Shurmur loves to pass the ball. And I don't know if that's exactly geared towards the strengths of this team right now. So it's going to be interesting going up against Delaware, exactly what Colorado decides to do in terms of their prioritization of who they're going to get involved this Saturday.
You just alluded to it a little bit with the early impressions of a close loss to Georgia Tech on Friday night of week 1 right there at Folsom in Boulder. Are there early reads on the strengths and weaknesses of this squad so far? I mean, it's such an easy thing to have the overreactions and maybe draw too many conclusions early on, but are there early indicators of what the strengths and weaknesses might be of this Colorado squad thus far?
This isn't like a shot at the offense or defense, but if there's one thing that I'm like very, very happy with, it was our special teams performance against Georgia Tech. For the last couple of years, we have not been able to kick touchbacks consistently, and the return game from opponents has been something that has kept opponents in matchups with us throughout these games. So the fact that we kicked 100% kickoffs through the end zone, touchback last week, that was awesome. I want to see that continued against Delaware. Can we do it without the altitude? We'll have to see. But also our punter, Damon Greaves, who transferred in from Kansas, he was fantastic, had 3 punts last Friday within the 20, almost had a fourth down on like the 2-yard line. So special teams, that's going to be something that I'm hoping can continue to be a positive aspect for us every week, no matter who the opponent is. Now, with particularly the offense, we do have true sophomore Micah Welsh kind of leading the backfield right now, number 29. He is somebody that needs more carries. He only had 11 against Georgia Tech. DeKalen Taylor is an FCS transfer from Incarnate Word out here in San Antonio, where I currently reside. So he had a nice touchdown catch, and he's a guy that can kind of take it to the house, whether it's out of the backfield or receiving a pass. He's just got a crazy amount of speed. So that's something that I would love for us to lean into, as well as hopefully having a game plan that gets our quarterback, Caden Salter, into a rhythm a little bit quicker in the game. I would argue that he didn't even get into a rhythm at all throughout that Georgia Tech game. So let's give him some easy pass concepts that get him a quick read, that get the ball out of his hands quickly. He held on to the ball way too much against Georgia Tech. So I just want to see this offense find a rhythm.
Definitely, it seems like the early read is, you would think the fan base views a Delaware game as a get-right kind of situation to find that rhythm and find a chance for a different passer in Julian Lewis to get a chance as well. And I think we heard earlier today, as we record on a Tuesday of game week, Coach Prime mentioning that you should expect to see Julian Lewis play. He didn't mean start, but expect to see him play at quarterback as well. So how much do you think, Colorado's point of view is looking forward to that aspect of it as well, to most likely have the opportunity to kind of work in different passers and throw some different looks at Delaware? We don't know even how early or late in the game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how much Lewis plays. I do expect him to play in this game. I think regardless, you see him play throughout the majority of the second half, like regardless of what the score is. You want to see what you got in him. I think Caden Salter, granted, it was his first Power 4 game. I'm a little bit more patient. I put more of the blame on Pat Shurmur doing Pat Shurmur things with that offense last week. But if Julian Lewis comes out and plays well, that could create an interesting conversation when we start conference play next week. A week from Friday against Houston, and then we finish out non-conference play week 4 against Wyoming. If Julian Lewis is looking like the better guy, I think we go with him. But I'm not out on Caden Salter again. He had almost 4,000 all-purpose yards a couple of years ago at Liberty. I think he just needs to settle in. But, Julian Lewis, he's got these Taco Bell deals. It's not like he's coming here to Colorado to play for free, right? So we're paying him some big bucks, and I think we're all very anxious to see what he can do. So, that's something that I'm expecting. I do kind of view this game as one that Colorado should handle convincingly. But again, with it being such a new team, many new pieces, who knows kind of how this game, there's always a fighting chance for the Blue Hens. I'll say that. And while our games last year against like Colorado State was an opportunity for us to kind of get right going into conference play before we face Baylor, it's going to be important that Colorado doesn't overlook the fact that Delaware is kind of a lower level now, I guess, G5 school, we see upsets pretty much every week. So it's going to be important for us to come out with that fire and not take our opponent lightly.
Do you have an idea of how you could relay to some laymen over here on this side of the college football world, relay a sense of Colorado's play style on both sides of the ball? Even as we talk about personnel changing so much, or I say so much, the headlining personnel definitely is different, like we talked about, but is the play style really carrying over pretty consistently from last year into this year? Any tweaks or anything that's consistent year to year that you would want to point out?
I think the big thing that you'll see with this team is speed. And I think we've built on that from the last couple of years as well. One change that you'll see too is that the field looks amazing. We finally got rid of that natural grass, and because it was in bad condition as the season went on, you got dirt patches we're kicking field goals out of and all that. We got brand new state-of-the-art turf, which is great, and that will continue to highlight the strength of this team, which is its speed on both offense and defense. So you'll see the linebackers, Martavius French, 37. You'll see Reggie Hughes, number 50. Sean Myers, I want to say he's number 40. These guys can fly from the linebacker position. Our secondary as well has tremendous speed, but really one of the things you'll have to worry about is coming off the edge. I think that's our strongest position group throughout the entire team has been our edge group, led by 53 Arden Walker, Samuel Okunloa, 93, and a few other guys like Keaton Wade, 27. So, I expect us to cause havoc in the backfield, no doubt about it. And then on offense, we probably have 5 or 6 guys capable of taking it to the house from any part of the field at wide receivers. So you'll see Omari Miller, number 4, Draylon Miller, number 6. He's another guy to watch out for. Sincere Brown, number 9. And then lastly, true freshman, Quentin Gibson, number 15. He's a small guy, kind of like Antonio Brown or maybe Deshaun Jackson-like in some ways, but he can take it to the house from anywhere. And like I mentioned earlier, number 20, DeKalen Taylor, he goes by the nickname Trackhawk. He's a guy that can take it to the house from any part of the field, along with Caden Salter, our starting quarterback. So we are predicated on speed. That is where we're dangerous, is in the open field, in the return game as well. And then lastly, I do want to say our interior defense, although we had problems with Georgia Tech giving up a few big runs there, overall, I was pleased with what the line did, the interior line did. Jaheim Otis, I'm trying to remember his number. I think it's number 90. You'll see Amari McNeil, number 88, who I think is our best interior defender. But those guys are going to be creating havoc up front. And one of the things I want to see is that we're not allowing any of these big runs. We might be good at stopping the run 80% of the time, but if we're giving up these 30, 45-yard runs, man, what's the point, man? We let up 320 yards on the ground last week. It was pathetic, and I want to see a better performance this week against the Blue Hens in that regard. But we're a team with speed, man. All that to say, it'll be interesting to see how Delaware matches up with this problem. Hopefully, we're giving you guys with our speed.
Yeah, it sounds like Big 12 football to me. It sounds like what you're describing and what I've watched and got to see against Georgia Tech. No, that lines right up. Running low on our segment here. It flies right by here. We appreciate you taking your time, and we're not done quite yet, though. We're not done quite yet. Yeah. I know we have a number of listeners, viewers, Delaware fans, new Delaware football fans, maybe people getting more engaged with the FBS jump. They're making their way out to Boulder, and they're experiencing it for the first time, as will I. I'm looking forward to it. My first time ever actually spending extended time in the state of Colorado and not just laying over in Denver, which I did do during the FCS playoffs a couple years ago. So excited to actually go see Colorado. Traditions outside of Ralphie, we know Ralphie's in a transition right now. It's just tough luck for all the visitors who'd love to see that tradition. Any other fulsome traditions and pregame stops or local recommendations, kind of the whole 9 yards? You can run away with it here for getting a sense of visiting Boulder.
Well, I mean, you're in Delaware, right? So, marijuana is legal over there just as it is in Colorado. So one thing I will suggest There are plenty of dispensaries around. You don't need to go to the ones on Pearl Street, downtown Boulder. Those ones, man, they're a little overpriced. It's all the same stuff. And you will smell plenty of it, especially in the second half there at Folsom. If you're coming in from Denver, maybe spending a day there, one thing that I would encourage people to check out is Meow Wolf, an experiential art museum. You could spend hours in there.
Wow, okay.
And it is incredible. Check out Meow Wolf. I love that. If you're going to get some food, some of my favorite spots downtown Boulder is Avanti. They also have a rooftop bar. So it's kind of like they got all sorts of different little restaurants in there, which is nice. And you can kind of seat yourself all throughout the building, but you get a beautiful view of the mountains and the Flatirons there. Definitely check out Avanti. Also, for breakfast or brunch, check out The Buff. It's like one of my favorite places to get breakfast in Boulder. And of course, probably our flagship brewery. There's a handful of breweries around there, but Avery Brewing Company is my favorite and probably largest brewery out there in Boulder. When it comes to the hikes, you can't go wrong with Chautauqua Park, just near campus, and Mount Sanitas. That'll probably take you a few hours going up and down, but beautiful view of all of Boulder once you get up there. So a lot to do. Hopefully the weather's going to be fantastic. And just pace yourself with the altitude. I can't tell you how many times I brought friends over that fly in that want to hike Mount Sanitas, and they got to tap out like halfway through.
That's a good point. So don't bite off more than we can chew all at once, is what you're saying.
Stay hydrated. Just chill that first day, man.
Somebody was telling me, I think it was Bryce, one of our co-hosts here at Feathers and Field Goals, it takes maybe 2 or 3 days, and then it might hit the worst, is when you've actually been out there a while and it starts catching up to you. I don't know if it's that or if it's right away, or I don't know what it's going to feel like. I'll be there for a little under a week in total, actually, so I don't know what I'm going to be hit with.
Well, I would still say that first day or so, you can be a little sleepy. You might want to take a nap or something like that, but just stay hydrated, drink your electrolytes, all of that. Have fun. If you're going to be there a week, Estes Park in Rocky Mountain National Park is maybe 45 minutes away or so not too far away. There's plenty of fun to be had, and Colorado fans will love seeing you there. It's a great place to go to a road game. Folsom Field, I feel like, is iconic, and you'll see our new scoreboard. You won't see Ralphie, but it'll be a beautiful scene there with the mountains, and the new turf, I think, just looks fantastic.
Well, it's big because I know local fan bases, any hometown fan base, it's the little things. It's the new features in the stadium. It's the playing surface is a big thing. I mean, those are all things that if they're new, Delaware wouldn't maybe know about that. We want to appreciate that and see that in these places. So thanks for pointing that out as well. And thanks, David, for giving us the lowdown. It flew right by. I look forward to doing these other versions of this across the season, but I appreciate you hanging with and setting up with me for my first time running this part of the program. So thank you so much again. And want to make sure folks can find you, share about, where you're most frequently posting and your schedule and that kind of thing.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for having me on, Daniel. I think you did a fantastic job, and best of luck to the Blue Hens the rest of the year. And again, congratulations on making it to the FBS level. It's a big deal. So you can follow along with me at David Talks Buffs on YouTube, on Twitter. If you are an NFL fan, Joe Flacco's career didn't go here so well, but if you want to follow the Broncos, I do have I'm one subscriber away from 3,000 on David Talks Broncos. So go follow me over there as well for NFL takes, but really appreciate you having me on, Daniel. This is fantastic.
Well, thank you so much. I know we look forward to joining over your direction coming up as well. So check out David's content when we go over and talk some more Blue Hens over on David's side of things. Until then, the Feathers and Field Goals podcast continuing after this.
Well, that was a joy to listen to, Dan. Getting to sit down with David. I think this is going to be one of the most underrated parts of doing a weekly show now is getting to sit down with a media representative of the future opponent. And, not only understand the work that they do on their platform, but to get cool recommendations and just to grow our network here at Feathers and Field Goals. So I know you enjoyed it as well to sit down with David before you head out to Colorado yourself to learn where should you stop once you land.
Yeah, it was a real treat, Bryce, and I appreciate you and our whole team getting us connected because I love a little hobnobbing or a little networking, like you said, a little getting to know, a little meet and greet, even virtually. So it was very nice, and definitely a bit of the local flavor there. And also that insight on the ground with the knowledge that David has, and kind of the perspective on how much Colorado has, like it feels like it needs to get right and prove and correct, and all of those week 1 to week 2 things that all of a sudden Delaware is going to be running into in the form of the Buffs.
Well, I can give you a tourist recommendation. I went there for my bachelor party recently. I'm wearing the Coors Brewery shirt now. If you have a
That's
chance,
very fitting. I noticed that. I noticed that. I did.
If you have a chance to get over to Golden, Colorado, super close to really close between Denver and Boulder. The brewery tour is a blast, and definitely one of the highlights for a tourist coming from the DMV, the East Coast. So definitely give that recommendation. But now let's jump into probably our first podcast version of 3 and Out. Second, if you include, I think the 3-point play we had a call last year. Dan got a great recommendation from somebody listening. 3 and Out might work a little bit better from the football side of things, but it works great with the addition of Brody. We can each now give our one thing that we're looking out for in this upcoming game. Brody, I'll start with you. What's something you're pinning on heading into week 2 for the Hens?
I'm looking on developing a run game. I think that Cardi probably took last week's FCS opponent, has an opportunity to develop and see who we had at pass catcher in the skill positions outside, but never really took the time to develop a run game, and I think that kind of bit us in the end with the way that game went on. We let Delaware State kind of hang around, and we actually lost time of possession in that game. So being able to develop a sort of run game from the jump, I think is going to be really helpful, and I'm interested to see how it's done.
Up-tempo offense that Ryan Cardi runs for sure. That was something, rewatching a second time, looking through the box score, I was shocked to see if the Hens over 5 yards a carry. The leading rusher of the game was Minicucci, really getting out of the backfield. Only 14 carries for that backfield, and splits Silver with 6 carries, but still averaging close to 6 yards a carry. So was efficient in his touches. Byron Ellison Jr., we talked about from Tulsa, 5 carries for 21 yards. Saeed St. Fleur got some touches at the end, including a 13-yard run, had 2 carries, and Greg Spiller got a carry. As we talked about, wouldn't be shocked to see all 4 of them get on the field night 1. So that's definitely a good point, and I'm sure the coaching staff themselves would like to get more than 14 runs out of the running back room themselves. Dan, I'm going to throw it over to you. Where are you going to really hone in on in the stands in Boulder?
Well, every game, knowing that Ryan Cardi is the head coach, talk about havoc plays. That would mean plays in the backfield defensively, but also takeaways. And I think about Delaware as an FCS program getting the win over FBS Navy and how instrumental takeaways were in that case. I can think of fumble recovery. That was at least one. Getting Navy off the field suddenly in the form of takeaways. Stealing possessions that way in a game where in the altitude you really can't afford your defense to be having to trek all the way down the field, be backpedaling that long on a long drive by Colorado, where all of a sudden Colorado, if you're gassing the defense, all of a sudden Delaware's defense is getting carved up on an explosive because the fatigue is really setting in too, and the team speed for Colorado is going to be such a problem that you really look at it as, can you steal a possession or two with some takeaways, at least one, in a way to prevent having to run the risk of racking up time of possession spent on defense. So I do think that it's a little bit of a 2-prong for me. It's one answer, but 2 prongs. Get a takeaway or 2 and make it 7 on the other end offensively. Can you get points off turnovers? I mean, it sounds cliche and so obvious to say. It's not necessarily the deepest analysis, but I think contextually, especially with the defensive atmosphere, like literally just the elevation, the number of playmakers Colorado is going to have to contend with, I do think that if Delaware can flip the field with a takeaway, steal a possession, get off the field defensively and spare having to rack up those minutes. I mean, if you get into the second half and the defense already has a lot of mileage on it in terms of TOP, that's going to spell a long day. I mean, there are a bunch of ways this can go sideways for Delaware pretty quickly in this game, and I can think of one of them is failing to get Colorado back on its heels with maybe a takeaway or 2. And we saw the interceptions we talked about earlier. Maybe in this case, it's like a forced fumble, really just ripping at the ball. Certainly want to wrap up well, though, because Delaware did not take good angles or tackle as well in many cases against Del State. Del State is definitely pretty bouncy and athletic, but Colorado more so in the Big 12. So while the priority is wrapping up better, maybe something getting a hat on a football and try to make something shake in that way. Because I think about what was the formula to be in a game and hang around against Navy. Not that this is the same opponent, but it was a little bit of that takeaway factor.
Yeah, I think you can. It might be a simple graph in terms of win percentage and winning the turnover margins. They usually go hand in hand. So definitely a good point there, and especially going into a place where you're 23.5 point underdogs right now. If you're going to set yourself with any chance to win, it's going to have to come from flipping the field. Winning on the defensive side, winning field position, and that comes from turnovers. Something that I'll note on here for mine is over the we talked about Marcus Yarns really being a star, and Phil Lutz really breaking out last season. We've seen in night one for the offense, Jake Thaw, Kyrie Duplessis, two early targets for the offense, especially for Nick Minicucci coming into the game. Is this offense going to be relying on Duplessis and Thaw to get the majority of the targets? Are they going to be, like we said, third and Thaw? That's going to be my new thing. Is he going to be the guy on third downs for the Hens? Or are they going to be more balanced? We've talked about other players joining the same year as Thaw and Max Patterson, and as well as Nick LeBoy. LeBoy getting a couple catches. Patterson seeing some limited touches. He was working through some stuff, in preseason camp. So I'm curious to see who gets the targets. I know Sean Wilson, they want to get him going. He was out there as well with Thaw and Duplessis. They had some screen passes for him, but I know they want to try to get him vertical as well. So really curious to see who emerges from this receiver room. Is it going to be mixed? Is it going to be a group that is top heavy? And I'm really curious to see that. So now let's get into the fun stuff. Let's get into the score predictions. I think, Dan, we gave ours inside of Grain Exchange for night one. I think we both probably missed the margin of the score there by a little bit for the Hens, but we were still 1-0 in terms of our game predictions here. Dan, I'll start you off. What's your score prediction for this one?
Yeah, Bryce, I can't take too many moral victories just to start the season, but I do think I was on pace at the end of the first half with Delaware's defensive total. I mean, Delaware, I believe, at the half had held Del State to a field goal, so I was on track for like a total of 6 points. But no, Caden Bennett, got to give him credit, and DSU having other plans. I do think that in this situation, you benchmark this Colorado score prediction of where does it fall on the Navy game of 22 and the Penn State game 23 continuum. You'd like to stay away from the Penn State 23 final score as much as you can. I would lean toward striking it right down the middle, but I do think if I had to choose it going toward one direction, it would be closer to Penn State with that crowd size, with Colorado having an edge and wanting to leave no doubt, because Colorado could have easily won that game against Georgia Tech. Colorado definitely feels as though it left points on the field. So I think Colorado is going to go out of its way to leave no doubt. I'm going to go with the Buffs in this one, really asserting themselves. Can Delaware keep it? Most likely Delaware will keep it under 50. I think with the Colorado offense not flipping a complete switch from an uneven game one to then going over 50 points, I'm going to say Delaware falls in this ball game by the final of 45-14.
45-14. So that 23.5 spread right now, you have Colorado really, like you said, asserting their dominance, getting a win like that. I'll jump to myself now here. I was on a Colorado podcast here as well this week. Hope you give it a listen if you haven't already. With sitting down with Manny of the Voice of College Football, the Colorado representative there. It was a great conversation. Got to learn a lot about the Buffaloes outside of everything that we learned here in this episode with David joining us as well. But Manny and I had similar predictions. Talking about the Colorado offense was another offense that really struggled to get going themselves week one. Of course, they're going to look to get ready in week two, but I don't think that on Manny's perspective, he had the confidence to really give them a lot of points in this one. He says he doesn't think they're going to crack 40. I had a similar one. I finished with this one with Colorado winning 38-20. So we have 45-14. We have 38-20. We're basically flipping a touchdown there between Dan and I. Brody, I'll let you close us off.
All right, so it's time for me to do my Lee Corso headgear selection. For every episode, I've sourced 2 helmets. I've sourced one of the opposing team, and of course my Delaware helmet. All homemade, by the way. They didn't mail me anything. I had to do this all out of pocket, but so I have to choose a helmet now. I have the Colorado one down here and the Delaware one down here. Hey, but I'm going to shock the world. I think Nick Minicucci puts it all together in week 2. I think the defense tightens up. I think the offense balls out. I don't think the altitude hurts at all, except for that we're going to be making every extra point. So give me... Hey, give me the Blue Hens, baby. Give me the Blue Hens. We're winning 63-28. High-scoring game, but we're going to get it done. 63-28. That's my final score. Roll Hens.
Brody carries the Lee Corso tradition now that he's finished off his time with ESPN, and there you have it. And
I got to bring out the pencil too, Bryce.
Not so fast, my friend.
Shout out Corso. Shout out Coach Corso. It was a pleasure over the years. We owe a lot to him in the community.
Well, thanks for being here with us tonight for our first in-week episode of the season, and safe travels to these two as they head out to Boulder and Folsom Field themselves. So again, thanks for being with us, and go Hens.